What does gallbladder do? It helps in absorption. It helps in absorption of the water and it causes concentration of the bile. Bile is very important for digestion of fats. Okay, I hope I'm audible to all of you. Okay, so first function of liver is formation and secretion of bile. Second function is nutrient and vitamin metabolism. Okay, the nutrient metabolism, what are the nutrients that are being metabolized? They are mainly glucose and other sugars. Okay, then there is amino acids, lipids, fatty acids, cholesterol, lipoproteins, fat soluble vitamins, water soluble vitamins, all these nutrients and vitamins, they are metabolized and that metabolism occurs in liver. Then there are substances which need to be inactivated, and the inactivation of these substances occur in the liver. What are these substances? These substances are the various medicines that we take in, the toxins that enter our body, the hormones, the steroids, the hormones that are present in the body. Okay, so these get inactivated. After they finish the function, they get inactivated in liver. Then another main function of liver is synthesis of plasma proteins, mainly the albumin, acute phase proteins, albumin, clotting factors, steroid binding, hormone binding proteins. All these plasma proteins, they are synthesized in liver. Okay, if there is some disease affecting the liver, then the plasma proteins will not be produced. The result will be the clotting factors will not be produced, and the person suffering from liver disease will be prone to bleeding. And once the bleeding occurs, the clotting may not occur. Okay. Similarly, a person who is suffering from liver disease will not be able to produce albumin in enough amounts, and so this person may suffer from edema because albumin helps in maintaining the oncotic pressure, plasma oncotic pressure, and liver is very important for immunity. The Kupffer cells present in liver, they help in immunity. Okay, so you may be asked, what are the functions of liver? List the functions of liver. So these are the various functions of liver: the formation and secretion of bile, nutrient and vitamin metabolism, inactivation of various substances, and most important is plasma protein synthesis and immunity. Okay, so this picture, I hope all of you do remember. In liver, as we know, liver produces bile. So the bile that is produced by liver gets stored in gallbladder, and in gallbladder, the bile is concentrated. Okay, mm, and when fat when fat-containing food, the kind enters the small intestine, then the CCK enzyme comes into action, cholecystokinin. It causes contraction of gallbladder and relaxation of sphincter of body, and the bile will be released. Bile helps in digestion and absorption of fat. Okay, so you might be remembering that these are the bile ducts, okay, left and right bile duct, which combine to form common hepatic duct, and common hepatic duct combines with the cystic duct from the gallbladder and forms the common bile duct. Okay, and it opens common bile duct, pancreatic main duct opens in the duodenum with and this opening is guarded by sphincter of body. This is relaxed on the action. This is relaxed by the action of cholecystokinin. Okay. After that, we already discussed about the neurohumoral secretion of bile, how bile is secreted. So we need to keep in our mind that for secretion to occur in GIT, there is nervous control and there is humoral control always. So nervous control is by the vagus nerve. The parasympathetic nerve causes increased secretion of bile, and the sympathetic stimulation causes decreased secretion of the bile. Similarly, the humoral factors, that is the cholecystokinin and the acetylcholine, these they will cause the release of CCK causes contraction of the gallbladder, release of sphincter of body, and the bile is secreted. Bile helps in emulsification of fat and digestion and absorption of fat. So this is a table given in your textbook, Yanong. This tells you about formation and secretion. This tells you about the functions of liver, which we discussed just a little while ago. And you should be familiar with this picture. This is a picture of a microscopic schematic picture of hepatocyte. As you already know, how bilirubin is degraded, how bilirubin enters the hepatocyte. So please look at this picture. Bilirubin is bound with albumin. So albumin, bilirubin, this complex, this enters inside the hepatocyte with the help of OATP. OATP stands for organic anion transporting polypeptide. Okay, OATP stands for organic anion transporting polypeptide. This is a transporter. It helps in transport of bilirubin, which is combined with albumin. What happens? The bilirubin enters inside, okay, and the albumin will remain outside. It helps in the transport of the bilirubin, OATP, organic anion transporting polypeptide. So what happens? Bilirubin that has to be conjugated. The main function of liver, you might be knowing, is conjugation of the bile, conjugation of the bilirubin. Okay, so this is unconjugated bilirubin. Unconjugated bilirubin bound to albumin is transported to the hepatocyte with the help of organic anion transport polypeptide. Then this bilirubin is unconjugated. It gets conjugated in the presence of enzyme glucuronide transferase, UDP glucuronide transferase. This enzyme is present in the liver hepatocyte. Now it gets converted into bilirubin glucuronide. Okay, bilirubin gets converted into monoglucuronides, diglucuronides, like that. Then once this bilirubin, unconjugated bilirubin, is converted into conjugated bilirubin, this conjugated bilirubin is transported to the biliary canaliculus. Okay, biliary canaliculus. And how does the conjugated bilirubin go to biliary canaliculus? It is by the help of a transporter protein known as MRP2. Okay, MRP. You must know that there is a transporter called MRP2. Okay, then MRP2 stands for multi-drug resistance protein. Okay, M2, it stands for multi-drug resistant protein 2. What happens is you might be wondering why I'm stressing on these two transporters. One is the unconjugated being transported to the hepatocyte by the help of the transporter OATP, organic anion transporting polypeptide, and another is the conjugated bilirubin. After conjugated bilirubin, it has to go to the biliary canaliculus. Okay, and later on these biliary canali they form the bile canal bile duct, and the bile ducts they form common hepatic duct, and common hepatic combines with the cystic duct and forms the common bile duct. Okay, so this transporter which transports the conjugated bilirubin from hepatocytes to the biliary canaliculus is known as MRP2, that is multi-drug resistance protein 2. Often in your exams, especially in the practical exams, in the spotters, or in the practical exams, the examiners they ask you about these transporters OATP, MRP2. They just block this and they will write A, B, like that, and they'll ask you about what does A denote, what does B denote. Okay, and then you have to that this is MRP2, multi-drug resistant protein 2, and this is organic anion transporting polypeptide. Okay, we follow this. This is important for your practical exam. I hope you understood after this? This picture you already know. This is about peristalsis, the movements of peristalsis. Okay, and let's talk what happens when our liver is diseased. Okay, jaundice. Jaundice occurs when jaundice is the yellowish discoloration skin, mucous membrane, and sclera. Okay, skin, mucous membrane, and sclera due to deposition of bilirubin, which usually occurs in presence of hyperbilirubinemia. Normal bilirubin level, normal serum bilirubin level is 0.2 to 1.2 mg per deciliter. Okay, 0.2 to 1.2 mg per deciliter, and they are of two varieties, conjugated bilirubin and unconjugated bilirubin. The conjugation of bilirubin is done in liver parenchyma, okay, in the hepatocytes that we saw a little while ago. Now let's see, where do we examine for jaundice? Clinically, jaundice is known as icterus. Okay, clinically, jaundice is known as icterus. We try to find out whether a patient is having icterus or not during our clinical examination. And at that time, we have to examine the upper bulbar conjunctiva, not the lower bulbar conjunctiva. Okay, upper bulbar conjunctiva, because upper bulbar conjunctiva becomes yellowish in a person who suffers from jaundice, because our bulbar conjunctiva contains elastine. Okay, and elastine has got higher affinity for bilirubin. Another site where we examine for icterus or jaundice is base of the tongue. We ask the patient to put the tongue, move the tongue, and we look at the base of the tongue. Mucous membrane of the palate, especially the mucous membrane of soft palate. The yellowish coloration of this mucous membrane of soft palate also indicates presence of icterus. Palms and soles, they can be yellow in color. When jaundice is quite advanced or when icterus is deep, we can see this discoloration of the skin all over the body. Okay, general skin surface will appear yellow. Then, how do we differentiate? If a person takes too much of carrot, if a person consumes too much of, not in less amount, but in huge amounts, then carotenemia can occur. Okay, so when we are examining a patient of jaundice, we should also be careful to distinguish it from carotenoderma, where the discoloration is limited to, where the yellowish discoloration is limited to palms, sole, forehead, knees, fold, with sparing of the sclera, where the sclera, the upper sclera, okay, the upper conjunctiva is not, the sclera or upper conjunctiva is not yellowish in discoloration. Then we should also distinguish with intake of, we should also ask the patient whether they are under some medicines or not, okay, whether they are under antitubercular medicines or not, whether they have excessive exposure to phenols, okay. Then we should know that the jaundice is basically divided into three types. Pre-hepatic jaundice, it is also known as hemolytic jaundice. Another is hepatic jaundice, and the third one is post-hepatic, obstructive, or surgical jaundice. Okay, it has got three names: post-hepatic, or obstructive, or surgical jaundice. So pre-hepatic, hemolytic jaundice, the name of the same thing. It can be pre-hepatic or hemolytic jaundice. Another entity is hepatic jaundice, and another one is post-hepatic jaundice, obstructive, or surgical jaundice. What happens is, prehepatic jaundice, as the name itself tells us, prehepatic jaundice means the disease process lies before the liver. That means the disease is, the jaundice is occurring mainly because of the pathology or disease process lying before the jaundice. It can be because of the hemolytic causes. Okay, hepatic jaundice means the liver parenchyma itself is damaged. There is some problem in the liver parenchyma itself. The liver parenchyma is damaged. Okay, it can be in conditions like cirrhosis of liver. Okay, post-hepatic or obstructive jaundice or surgical jaundice. What happens is, in this condition, liver is normal, but the conjugated bilirubin is not able to reach to the intestine, mainly because of the obstruction in the biliary passage. Okay, it can be because of the gallstones or any other obstructions. So let's see, prehepatic jaundice, it arises from the blood before it enters the liver. It can be because of the various hemolytic diseases that occur. Another is intrahepatic causes. It is due to disease of the liver parenchyma. Another is post-hepatic, the result of obstruction of the biliary tree outside the liver. Okay, so these are the three main causes of jaundice. After that, the prehepatic causes of jaundice or the hemolytic causes of jaundice is increased heme liberation. Like in cases of hemolytic anemia, somebody is suffering with malaria or reduced red cell lifespan, or at that time, too much unconjugated bilirubin is there, and that leads to this kind of jaundice. Another is intrahepatic jaundice or hepatic jaundice. This can occur because of the problem in the liver parenchyma. Okay, and another cause is post-hepatic jaundice, where there is obstruction of the biliary passage. Okay, then this is the same thing in a different way. You can see the causes, the hepatic causes like hepatic carcinoma, hepatitis, they lead to damaged hepatocytes. The liver parenchyma is damaged, so hepatocellular or hepatic jaundice occurs. There is hyperbilirubinemia. The liver is not able to conjugate the bilirubin. Okay, so there is high amount of unconjugated bilirubin in the blood. So hepatocellular jaundice, we must understand the word hepatic suggests that the liver parenchyma is diseased, so liver will not be able to perform its function. Liver will not be able to conjugate the bilirubin. There will be higher concentration of there will be inability of the liver to conjugate the bilirubin. So conjugated bilirubin level will be reduced. Unconjugated bilirubin level will be increased. Whereas in case of obstructive or post-hepatic jaundice, what happens is liver has conjugated the bilirubin, but the conjugated bilirubin is not reaching the intestine, maybe because of some obstruction in the biliary tree. It can be gallstone obstructions like that. Okay. After that, we need to study about the signs and symptoms of jaundice. Okay. The signs and symptoms of jaundice. So the first one is yellowish discoloration of skin, mucous membrane, and sclera. Sclera. Then we should ask the various symptoms in the patient. Patient who is suffering from jaundice, and if it is hepatic jaundice, in that condition, the plasma proteins will not be formed in adequate amounts. So what happens is when plasma protein is not adequate amounts, then albumin will not be produced in blood, isn't it? So swelling occurs, edema occurs. Okay, the color of stool becomes light colored or pale in case of hepatic and obstructive jaundice. The color of urine becomes dark colored. There is itching of the skin. Nausea, vomiting occurs. Abdominal pain occurs. Fever can occur. Weakness is there. There is loss of appetite. Anorexia. There is headache, confusion. Okay, so these are the various signs and symptoms in jaundice. And this picture helps you to understand, to identify which type of jaundice a person is suffering from. So if it is a case of prehepatic jaundice and we do the test total bilirubin, it can be either normal or increased. But in case of hepatic jaundice, it is increased. In post-hepatic jaundice also, it is increased. Conjugated bilirubin, it remains normal in case of prehepatic jaundice because the liver is able to conjugate the bilirubin. It is the amount of unconjugated bilirubin that is raised, isn't it? So in hepatic jaundice, conjugated bilirubin is increased. Post-hepatic jaundice increased, and unconjugated level is all. Unconjugated bilirubin is also increased in case of hepatic jaundice because it depends upon the level conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin in hepatic jaundice depends upon the extent of damage to the liver parenchyma. If the liver parenchyma is too much damaged, then the conjugated bilirubin level would be reduced, because when there is a severe damage of the liver parenchyma, the liver will not be able to conjugate the bilirubin. So in that case, conjugated bilirubin will be decreased. So it depends upon the extent of damage to the liver, that these levels will fluctuate. And liver is one of the most one of the organs which regenerate very quickly. So we have to take into consideration those points. Post-hepatic jaundice, unconjugated bilirubin level is normal. Then let's see about the urobilinogen level. Okay, this tells you about the color of the urine. In prehepatic jaundice, the color of the urine is normal, whereas in case hepatic jaundice and post-hepatic jaundice, the color of urine is dark yellow. It is dark, whereas stool color in case of obstructive jaundice is pale. Then there are certain enzyme levels that can be assayed in blood. Alkaline phosphatase level and alkaline transferase and aspartate transferase levels, that is SGPT and SGOT. These remain normal in prehepatic jaundice, but in post-hepatic and hepatic jaundice, they are increased. Conjugated bilirubin in urine is not present in case of prehepatic jaundice, whereas it is present in hepatic jaundice and post-hepatic jaundice. Okay, splenomegaly is present usually in hepatic jaundice. Okay, so this helps us in diagnosis. Then I hope you already studied this in your biochemistry classes. So this is a condition of how the bilirubin is broken down. Okay, so extravascular intravascular hemolysis, unconjugated bilirubin combines with the albumin, enters the liver. Okay, this is the same place. What is the name of the transporter here? OATP, isn't it? This is similar to this picture. I'll show you this picture. They'll ask you what does OATP stand for, organic anion transporting polypeptide. Okay, and then what is this transporter? MRP2, multi drug resistant polypeptide 2. Okay, so these are the points that you need to know, the most important ones. I hope that you have understood about the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Let's see it again. Digestion of carbohydrates. You must keep in your mind that maximum amount of digestion and absorption that occurs in our GIP is occurring in small intestine. Okay, and maximum amount of water that we take in, maximum amount of water is also absorbed from small intestine. Okay, you will face this question in your MCQs most probably. What is the site where maximum water absorption occurs? It is small intestine. Okay, so let's see about digestion of carbohydrates. Starch gets converted into maltose. The polysaccharides, they get converted into disaccharides by the help of ptyalin, which is an enzyme in saliva, present in saliva. Then starches are acted upon by pancreatic amylase, is present in the pancreatic juice. Then it is converted to maltose. Maltose, which is a disaccharide, and 3 to 9 glucose polymers. Okay, maltose and 3 to 9 glucose polymers. What will they do? They will be acted upon by the enzymes. These enzymes are present on the brush border of the intestinal cells. That means the intestinal cells, that is the small intestinal cells, they have got villi, isn't it? The villi are finger-like projections. These finger-like projections, they give brush border appearance. So on these brush border appearance, that is on the mucous membrane, on the intestinal cell, on the luminal side, in the brush border, there are enzymes called maltase, alpha dextrinase. These are disaccharadases. Ase means enzyme. Okay, so disaccharadases, why? They're together known as disaccharadases. Why? Because they're called disaccharidases. Why? Because they act on the disaccharides. can be maltase, they can be lactase, they can be sucrase, or they can be alpha dextrinase. Okay, so maltase and alpha dextrinase, they basically act on the maltose and 3 to 9 glucose polymers, and then they get converted into glucose. Okay, glucose is a monosaccharide. After that, let's talk about lactose. Lactose is saccharide which is acted upon by an enzyme lactase. Okay, lactase is also present in the brush border. Lactase converts it into galactose. In some individuals, lactase deficiency occurs in adulthood or in old age. So you might have come across some of your relatives or some people in the society or some people in your family members who are able to digest milk in proper adequate quantity when they are small in age. But as they grow older, when they reach the 50s and 60s, 40s or 30s even, they're not able to digest milk. Why does it happen? Because in these individuals, this enzyme is not developed. Lactase deficiency can occur gradually when a person reaches the age of around 50, 60, 40, like that. That is known as lactase intolerance. And what happens is in these individuals, they cannot digest milk, but they can digest curd. Okay, so let's see. This is sucrose gets converted into sucrase. Sorry, it gets converted into fructose by the help of the enzyme sucrase. Okay, this occurs in the brushed border of the intestine. So I hope digestion of carbohydrates is clear to all of you. This occurs on the luminal side. Okay, this is a this occurs on the luminal side. For digestion of carbohydrates, it is occurring all on the luminal side. What I mean by luminal side is digestion of carbohydrates occur on this brush border. It is not intracytosolic. It is on the surface of the, it is on the brush border. Okay. So that's why once the carbohydrates, they are broken down into monosaccharides, the enzyme, the transporters you must be familiar with. For glucose and galactose, the transporter is sodium dependent SGLT1 transporter, GLUT5 for the sucrose. Okay, for glucose and galactose, the transporter is sodium dependent SGLT1, but for sucrose, it is it is not SGLT1, it is GLUT5. Okay, you must remember the transporter. After that, let's talk about protein digestion. Before that, you must remember that you must recall that pancreatic juice, it has all the proteolytic enzymes in inactive form. And those inactive proteolytic enzymes, when they come in contact with intestinal juice, which is known as succus entericus, it consists of an enzyme called enterokinase. So what does enterokinase do? It converts trypsinogen, the inactive form of the proteolytic enzyme, into active form trypsin, and trypsin will convert other trypsinogen into trypsin, and trypsin will convert the inactive form of other proteolytic enzymes into their active, respective active forms. Like chymotrypsinogen will be converted to chymotrypsin, proelastase to elastase, procarboxypeptidase A to carboxypeptidase A, procarboxypeptidase B. See, the pro means it is inactive form. Now it becomes converted into carboxypeptidase B. So this way protein digestion occurs, and protein digestion occurs in three phases. One is larger peptides, they get converted into smaller forms. Then there will be the smaller forms, that means dipeptides and tripeptides. These are on the surface of the luminal digestion. Okay, luminal surface digestion. After that, these will enter inside the small intestinal cells. Okay, by the help of the transporter PEPT1, that is peptide transporter. Okay, and sodium hydrogen exchanger NHE and peptide transporter PEPT1. Okay, then inside the cell, digestion process occurs. Further, the dipeptides and tripeptides, they are further broken down by the help of the proteolytic enzymes present here. And then the simplest form, they are converted into the simplest forms, that is the amino acids. See the simplest one, amino acid. Then the amino acids are transported to the basolateral side, basolateral amino acid transporters. Okay, so this is how protein digestion occurs. You can see digestion of proteins. This is from Guyton. The other one that we were discussing is from Ganong. So proteins, the larger chunks are broken down with the help of these enzymes, proteolytic enzymes, present in the pancreatic juice, and then it is converted into polypeptides and amino acids. This is up to the luminal phase, and then it enters inside the cell with the help of sodium hydrogen exchanger and this one. It enters inside the cell with the help of sodium hydrogen exchanger and polypeptide transporter. And inside the cell also proteolytic enzymes act and convert the di and tripeptides into amino acids, and amino acids are sent to the blood by the help of the transporters. Okay, so this is what is happening here. Peptidases, they send it to the amino acids, they convert it and they send it to the blood. Then we should know about the digestion and absorption of lipids, fats. Okay, it is mainly by the lipase, pancreatic lipase. Okay, they convert, they help in the emulsification of the fat, digestion of the fat, fat with the help of bile and with the help of pancreatic lipase. Okay, fat gets converted into emulsified fat by the help of bile and the agitation movement that occurs. And this emulsified fat gets converted into fatty acids and two monoglycerides by the help of pancreatic lipase. Okay, so this is how fat digestion occurs. And fat is absorbed via lactile. Okay, via the lactile, the lymphatic channels. Okay, the glucose, galactose, sucrose, sorry, glucose, galactose, yes, the monosaccharides and the amino acids, they are absorbed by the blood. Okay, they will enter the portal circulation, whereas fat lacteals. Then you need to know about how iron is absorbed. Iron is absorbed in the duodenum. Okay, how does it get absorbed? This picture is from Ganong, and this flowchart is important. What it says is, first, converted into ferrous form. And then the ferrous form is transported inside the cell. This is a enterocyte, a small intestinal cell. Okay, so what happens is this ferrous ion enters inside the small intestinal cell, the enterocyte, with the help of the transporter. Its name is apical membrane iron transporter, DMT1. This is just the name of a transporter. So what happens after that is heme is transported into the enterocyte. Heme is transported into the enterocyte by the transporter HT, a separate heme transporter. Then heme, what happens? HO2 and HO2 releases iron from the heme. Okay, when heme is active, when heme undergoes the reaction, it also gives rise to Fe2 plus, that is ferrous. And then ferrous is some of the intracellular iron, that is Fe2 plus, is converted to Fe3 plus, and it is bound to ferritin. Okay, and it remains inside the cell as a storage form. The rest binds to the basolateral transporter, which is known as iron transporter ferroportin, Fe. Fe is iron transporter ferroportin, and this is transported to the interstitial fluid. Okay, this transporter is aided by HP, the small p, that is HP stands for hepastin. It is a protein. Okay, so hepastin. So what happens is Fe2 plus then reaches the blood. So with the help of the transporter ferroportin and hepastin, Fe2 plus is transported from enterocyte to the blood side. Okay, in plasma, ferrous is converted to ferric from Fe3 plus, and then it is bound to the iron transport protein, transferrin. Okay, and this is how it is present in the blood. So this transport of the iron is also very important for your exams. Then calcium is also absorbed from the duodenum. Okay, vomiting you have already studied. So we have completed the digestive system and the hepatobiliary system. Okay, so let's see what are the causes of gallstone. Gallstone or cholelithiasis is the most common disease condition in our part of the world. So the causes, this is again from Guyton. The causes can be too much absorption of water from bile. It can be absorption of bile acids from bile. It can be too much cholesterol in the bile, or there can be inflammation of the epithelium of the gallbladder. Okay, so these can be any of the four causes of gallstone, any of the four common causes of gallstone. Then I hope you have followed what I taught you. What we did is in our study of GIT is in the first class we studied in the beginning lecture we studied about the layers of the functional layers of the gastrointestinal tract and the regulation. Okay, it consisted mainly of the four layers, that is from inside out. Luminal side it was mucosa, submucosa, circular muscle layer, muscularis propria or muscularis externa, which consists of circular muscle layer and longitudinal muscle layer. Then comes the serosa, isn't it? Mesothelium or serosa. So then this is a picture of Yanong, but this is the picture of Guyton. Be ready to answer if it is, if the picture of either of your textbooks are coming in exam. Okay. So then we talked about the regulation. How is GIT regulated? So one was the nervous control. Okay, in that we studied about enteric nervous system, intrinsic nervous system, that is enteric nervous system, that is consisting of Meissner's plexus or submucosal plexus and myenteric plexus or Orpak's plexus. Then we studied about gastrointestinal hormones. Then gradually we studied about different parts of the GIT. Then we studied about motility of the GIT. In motility of GIT, we studied about deglutition. In deglutition, we studied that it is a reflex process. Okay, and how does it occur? It occurs in three phases. After deglutition, we studied about the and we studied how food is mixed up in the stomach. After that, how food reaches the stomach. We studied a little bit about gastric emptying. After that, we studied about the movements of the intestine, which is mainly peristalsis. As all of you know, the law of gut is from oral cavity to aboral region, isn't it? And we talked about the neurotransmitters involved. Okay. After that, we talked about the antiperistalsis, that is vomiting. We talked about peristalsis, mass movement, that is defecation. We talked about then we talked about the secretions of various parts of the GIT, from salivary secretion. Then we studied about gastric juice secretion, HCl secretion. We studied about pancreatic secretion. Then we studied about digestion and absorption of all the nutrients. We studied about bile juice secretion. We studied about liver. Okay, and you with this we end this gastrointestinal system and hepatobiliary system. From my side, the system is complete. If you have any questions, you can ask. Okay? I hope you are listening. Is there any question, class?